All right. Welcome, everyone. Um, Tonight, actually, this was a request webinar by our own Deb Perry. One of the questions she had was about training progression, right? How do you go from one to the other, or how do you know how to move on or not? Which is a really good topic and probably uh, something we probably need to talk more about. But um, we do in class, but for this particular, it's like now things have been brought more to the forefront. So, and it is a way of thinking, and this is kind of how I run my classes too, right? I run small chunks, and I just happen to know, I say, okay, now you can move on to this and to that. But for you guys, how to figure out when your dog is ready to move on to the next level, or if you've moved too quickly, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and that takes time, lots of time, because you have to kind of see where your dog is at and all that kind of stuff. So um, anyway, but if you have questions or whatever, and some of you are educators too, so you'll have probably some insights as to why some things work and some don't. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so progression is how do you know to move on to the next thing and to the next thing. So it's so interesting because I, when I developed the online course for some of you who are taking it, that's how I think, right? For this level, we do this. For this level, we do this. For this level, we do that, and just move them all along. But and that's why there's classes that are reflective of those levels, right? So that's kind of nice. But when you're at home and you're practicing, how do you know you've gone from one point to the next, right? And some people kind of know it really easily, and some people don't. So we'll kind of, and so ask questions, don't be shy. Um, so here's how do you master a skill, right? And this is for everything, not dog, it's not only for dog training, it's for any skill you ever want to learn yourself or teach a dog or whatever, right? This is kind of the basics of how to learn something or how to get good at it. So the first thing is getting the fundamentals right. And Joanne can speak to this a lot more because if you have a poor foundation, you have a lot of bad habits. And as an instructor, you get people from other trainers or other places that have maybe started not with the best foundation, so you have to go back and fix. And then you also have to just go back and, in many cases, correcting them. And I'm going to give you an example. I used to do agility, and I did agility for a long time. Well, when I first started, I had no desire to compete. It was just having a good time with my dog, and I just wanted to give him something to do because it was a pain. Well, I didn't get a really good foundation on the wave pulls. And for his whole career, we struggled with those damn things. He got better, but they always, the poor foundation kept showing up every so often, right? And the poor, if you, and same in nose work. When you have that poor foundation and you keep practicing it, you just keep seeing more of it. And you, not that you can't get rid of it, but it's a little tougher. It's tougher for sure. Like if you develop some poor habits or poor foundation, it's hard for them to go completely away, I think. You can make it better, but not 100%. So Joanne, do you have anything to add to that? Where'd you go?
Well, I'm here.
Oh.
Um,
It's like, I don't see you in my line.
I'm on top, but not on your top. So I will just tell you from personal experience, right? I think most everyone on here knows that, I had a tragedy and I lost all my dogs. And so I got a new puppy and I really love this game. So I wanted to play this game. And I introduced him to Odor at 9 weeks old and off we went. And I spent probably the first 6 months of his, foundational training pushing too hard, too fast. Thankfully, right, I caught it. We caught it. Nancy sort of scolded me on a couple of things. I'm like, no, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. And when things did get a little bit harder, right, then you really see it. You don't see it at the low levels. You see it when there's real true problem solving. And I think by the time you're there, then it's really hard to fix and go back to what you missed. So I think you hear us both say, all the time, especially those who have taken the online classes, right? You don't have to set the hides that hard, right? We're not trying to make a huge challenge for the dog. We're trying to create foundational skills and really get them confident. So that's why, and like from personal experience, thankfully I brought my dog back from the brink of disaster, but he does still have a few bad habits that I have a feeling I'm going to deal with forever now.
Well, and Joanne innocently goes, look at the video of Noah. I'm like,
because he's pretty slow. I'm like, well, Nancy, he's a baby. She goes, no, he's slow anyway. So I'm like, you don't know. Shut up. She knew. Of course she knew.
So, so a good foundation, spend the time doing it right. It's so worth it there. Miss Audrey, with your new little puppy, take your time, because you'll go so much faster. Yeah, you'll go so much faster when you do that. And this is what I used to be, a lumper, and I know you, but now that's all I am, is a small chunk it, make it smaller and smaller. So break down a big task to smaller task. So one of the things you can do, and I think Deb Perry will probably appreciate this, write down all the components of a behavior you're working, right? Like in this case, odor obedience. I kind of gave you that example. Odor obedience is it's kind of a big chunk, right? It's a big behavior. So what are some of the components to odor obedience? Recognizing odor, the motivation to go to the odor, and then actually physically going there, working through that there. So those are all 3 pieces of things you can work on towards the big goal of odor obedience, right? So when you're looking and you're having some difficulty, what is the end goal of that skill, and then write down what you need for it, so that you can then go in there and chunk it down, and you can work on those smaller pieces. It makes it easier, and you move along. It seems to me you move so much faster, so much quicker for the dog. I think Mindy, we had a little bit of a breakthrough with was it the elevated, right, Deb? The
elevated, the ones we were just working on with the skinny
yes.
points. Yeah.
Yes. So we had to break those down for Mindy, because all elevations are not created equal for Mindy. So we had to break it down for her smaller, so that she can get that, right?
Right. And the smaller breakdowns are really what's needed to problem solve from a trainer's perspective, be it you or the people that you work with, right? Because if you say my dog has an odor problem, it's not going to be the whole problem, right? It might be a recognition, it might be a motivation, it might be a going, it might be a staying at odor, right? But it's really rare that all of those things are broken. It's usually one of those pieces, sometimes 2. And really breaking the exercises down to ask your dog, how are you at this, right? What's your skill level on this? That's where you really start to get answers from the dog.
Right. And most of the time, just so you know, odor obedience, the biggest problem is the motivation. Just saying. And most of the time is we move fast through it, so they're not that motivated to go there. So, and then get a coach, which most of you are already training with somebody. The feedback is important. Training by yourself is good. You want that practice, but you have to have somebody else that's going to look at what you're doing, see how you're working it out, and give you the feedback about what you're doing and how you're doing, your technique, your movement, your rate of reinforcement is what I meant to write there. and also what you're doing well, right? What are you doing well? Because it's not only, oh, you suck at this or that and the other. You have to also know what's going well. Because if you don't know what you're doing right, you could then at least you would take your mind off of that, right? You're okay. I'm good at Leash handling, fine. I'm not going to worry about that, right? So get a coach one way or the other, whether you attend classes or whether you do virtual or whether you, whatever, just work with somebody or a friend that maybe is pretty good and wants to help you, but get some feedback. It's really important. And have an open mind when you go for the feedback, because sometimes you don't want to hear what the feedback has to say. And then this is a big one that I see a lot of people are guilty of. Not so many people here, but is avoid the information overload. So here's, and this is what I mean by information overload. You go to 1,000 different webinars, you go to 1,000 different people for training, you go to read 1,000 different books. It is so much stuff that you're actually more not as efficient, and it really does slow your progress because your brain is trying to figure out, okay, which should I do, which methodology. And I think the thing is, I think it's a good idea to go see what other people are doing, but then you're just going to pick one or two and then go with that and then work with that, right? And then that way you're only getting that information and you're not trying to process 1,000 different things. And in nose work, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't go together, right? Some of the training. And the truth is, and here's, I'm going to sound very, it's like when you're working with someone, that coach should have other successful students too. Not just them, but their students should relatively do pretty well. And there should be more than one. Otherwise, it's like you're just, okay, hopefully this will work, right? So just be mindful. So you want to look at all those things and just, there's so much information out there. Really take it and then just tease it apart. Have a basic foundation of how you want to work and what works for you and your dog. And then what other information comes in, kind of see if it fits into that. And some stuff does, and sometimes some stuff doesn't. But just be mindful of that, because it gets it can get pretty confusing for things. Because a lot of people, and we're going to talk a little bit about this, oh, this trainer knows all this stuff and it's great, and I'm sure they're really great. But then how are their students doing? Are they doing well? Are they titling? Are they at the upper levels? What are they doing? So that you know, besides them being a nice person, you know what I mean? It's no different than if I was let's see, I was hiring a plumber, and he was a really nice guy, but he's really not done a lot of really complex plumbing work. I'm like, well, you might be a nice guy, but I want somebody who's going to fix my toilet the right way, even though you're a nice guy. What's your history there? What's your references, right? And then practice, right? Practice smart, practice often, and practice in short intervals. It is better, and this goes for all training, all of it. It is better to just do for a puppy, couple of sits, couple of downs, be done, and do it again in a couple of hours, instead of trying to get an hour worth of work, because the dog's gonna be like, yeah, I'm so over it, I don't want to. So it's better to do short intervals. And I know it's hard when we all, you know, the rest, you know, we have jobs, and we have to go to those these days, but just be mindful of that. Short practice often and practice smart. And also, and this is what, have a plan for your training. Like, this is what I'm going to work on today. So for, like, if you have a puppy, I'm going to pick on Audrey. If you have a puppy, all right, we're going to practice on sitting at the door before going outside. That's going to be the thing. So you will work on it. You can work on it once every day, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times a day. So those are not long training sessions, but he's going to be real good at it over time, because he's getting practice a lot, short, quick, and very often. And you have a goal. You know what that looks like. You want that puppy to sit before that door opens. And the minute that, you know, and then he has to wait there until, so you know what the end result you want. So that's what you should have for every training that you're doing. Do you have anything to add, Joanne?
Nope. I think you covered that one.
Okay. And this was a really interesting one, because I have a strong why. What is your motivation to do what you're doing with your dog? Because that why, or that motivation why you're doing it is going to carry you when you have low skills, or very, your skills are not as strong, and when you're sucking a little bit. you want, because we all are doing that, you want to be able to, like, no, I'm going to do this because I know my dog can do it, or whatever your motivation is to do it. So when you're struggling and maybe you're not progressing as quickly as you want to, that's what that reason why you're doing it is it's going to carry you through. So it really does matter, why are you doing it? Like, do you want to have fun? You want to see how far you can take your dog? You want to see how good your dog can get, or be the best dog you can be, or whatever your motivation is. Um, um, or you want to see how you can train your dog to that level, whatever that motivation is. Because that's because it's like, why do it made me think about what my why is for training my own dogs, right? Because right now I want to kill them, so that's probably a big why right now, but that's not the main why. I think for me, the why is just to develop them as far as they can be, and to be the best they can be at whatever, at nose work, right? They seem to enjoy it, and see how far we can get. I don't know. What are some of the motivations that you guys are doing nose work, besides keeping them busy and not killing them, other than that?
I started doing it because of her reactivity, as a way to focus her and build up her confidence, because she was so afraid of everything.
Right.
And now we're way beyond that.
Yeah. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. She is like, whatever, I'm doing stuff. So why would you say, yes, that was your original motivation, but why now? It just,
Because we both love it, and it's good for our bonding. Although at this point, I don't know that she can get any closer.
Amen, sister. I think that's true for all the dogs. Now, especially after this, after the quarantine on top of it. So.
And I'm really interested in seeing if she can act. Well, I know she can at this point. Just finish up her elite.
Oh yeah. That's not a why, it's a when. For her, right.
At this point, but we didn't start out that way.
Yes, right.
So it changes throughout the training.
Yes, it does. How about anybody else have another why?
Well, we started off okay, and then we hit our wall in the elite things. And so it's been a challenge to me to go and see what I can do to go and spur her along, to gain confidence with both of us. That was actually my mental management goal, is to be a confident team member. And I think we're working on it, and we've been doing pretty well, I think. So.
Yeah, you have. Yeah. Anybody else? Any other whys? Because I'm always curious as to why people, I know there's other people that are just, I want to get as many titles as possible, which, that we're always going to have those, right? That's never going to change. But for
for me and Pippi, because, we've been working on our 3 for a while, and I had to kind of think about what my motivation is. And even though we don't have that title yet, she still has such a good time,
right,
that I figure I should just keep bringing her, because she's so social. So I kind of have had to think about this with her, but I don't want to stop doing it with her just because we haven't gotten that title yet. She's so bored of seeing me, she just can't wait to get out. So
yes. When she saw me at the private, she's like, oh, thank you, Jesus.
Oh, I know. She runs into the vet office if we go there. She's like, please, I need to see my people.
That's good. All right. Well, good. Thanks for sharing that. Because it's like, you really have to think about, why is that? Yeah, because the titles are fun, don't get me wrong, and it's enjoyable. But for me, it's always like looking to see how much better my dog has gotten over time, and how, how the training is coming along, and all the work that I'm putting in, how that's gonna, how we're doing. So for me, that's kind of how it, but you have to have a strong why, because when you are like not doing well, or you're struggling, or you're stuck in a spot, that why is going to keep you going. Otherwise it's no fun. So
You know, Nancy, with Rika, it was more the fact that she didn't like to be around people. She didn't really, she's very independent, but it gave her an opportunity. When my instructor, when Joanne was saying, you know, she'll work for it. Don't worry about it. She'll work and leave people alone, which I found out she has done.
Yeah.
But then I got greedy, and it was a matter of, my God, if she can do this, I'm going to make her do that. And if she can do that, I'm going to make her do this. And I've just seen where now I have to say, find it, you know, and a little better this week because of some instruction I got.
Yeah. She
but-
started to say, you find it, screw you.
Yeah, exactly. And I wanted to find it. That's another problem.
Well, those female shepherds are something else that way, for sure. Ugh. Yeah, my lab is like, I'm happy to find it. The shepherd's like, you better make it worth my while, man. So
Exactly.
different. And Penny feels the same way. And while Penny's not that independent, she still has the same attitude. She's like, yeah, it's better making the cookies. Well, but that's what I mean. I think it's something to think about, like, why are you doing it, right? And there's not a right or wrong. It's personal and different for all of us, right? And then the 80-20 rule. You get 80% of the skills from 20% of the work, and that's true. That's why you don't. If you're sticking with a lot of the foundations and stuff, I think you're gonna get the majority of the skills that way, right? And sometimes when you're doing really hard work, you don't even have to. You don't need all that hard stuff. You just need some good foundation to keep that dog working real well that way. So it's one of an interesting. The 80-20 rule is in effect for a lot of different things in nose work. That's for sure. All right, so that's what I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about and kind of have, like, these 7 steps are what you need for mastery. And actually there's a guy that actually put this out on YouTube for learning. So he tries to learn a new skill every month, like playing a violin or master juggling or whatever. He tries to master applying these particular rules. And I thought, yeah, it's exactly what we need for nose work. And when you're working on different skills and all that, even though we just have a lot more skills to work on, right? It's not one skill for you have to have odor obedience, you have to have problem solving, you have to have other things. So all the things, so I challenge you to kind of write down like all the pieces of certain bigger behaviors, like elevations. What do you need to be able to do first to get there? First, you got to go start to have them look high, just a little bit above their nose. Go up a little more. Okay, now you're going to put it more in the corner. Then you're going to do in the middle. Then you're going to move on, and that's how you move it on, so that they can get better at it. So I wanted to talk about, because we're going to look at some video to talk about how to think about to progress and what you're looking for as you're progressing your dogs, right? In training. But I did want to talk a little bit about cognitive bias and how it affects training, because it does affect our training, right? And we just need to, and we can't help it, and we're going to do what we do, but we have to be aware that it could be happening. Just think about it, or be aware because we all do it. I wish I could say that we don't, but we all do it. So we have to just catch ourselves and really check ourselves when we're thinking about stuff. So there's a bunch more. This is just a few. Confirmation bias. This is really prevalent in the dog training community. This goes back to, oh yeah, we've been doing that way for 30 years. So, and they pick and choose information based on what they already think is true, right? So so it's no different like the research. You're gonna pick the research that's gonna support your belief system. So, right? It's like, there was a study done that spaying and neutering really early is great for dogs. Well, and then you have to ask, well, how big was the sample? How many people? Blah, blah, blah. And when you really look at it, it's like, well, that wasn't good enough. So that's really big in dog training, huge, especially among trainers, especially around the ones that have been around a long time. That I've been doing well. It's been this way for 30 years.
Yeah,
It worked for
you see that a lot in the hunting world, a lot. You can't teach a dog to retrieve without pinching the ear. You can't teach a dog they'll never do that if you don't do it this way. It's not true, right? But you have these people who have been training these field dogs for 30 years. Why would they do anything different? Why would I mess it up when it works for me?
Mm-hmm. So, and the other thing that I'm really, that you really see a lot as a trainer is like, well, you know how those German Shepherds are.
Yes.
It's just how they are. It's like, no, that's not it. Your dog just, because I get that as an instructor a lot. Well, she's a bird dog. She can't help it. Yeah, actually she could. You just have to train it.
It's a beagle. They don't do that. They can't pay attention that long.
So when you're thinking about those things, just be very careful. And yes, while breed tendencies do play a part in our training, they're not the excuse for, no, sometimes, oh, you know how aloof Akitas are. They just don't want to do the work. No, that way he just doesn't want to do it for you today, right? So you really have to be thoughtful of that, because you're like, well, he always does that. Well, he's a lab. You know how they are. No, I don't. I have a lab that loves food, yes. And yes, a lot of them are like that, but not all of them. I know a few labs that could care less about food. They're weird, but no. But my lab is a typical, right? She's ridiculous about food. But other labs, not all labs are like that. She just happens to be. And she's on the upper scale of crazy about food. She's, way in the other spectrum, the other stratosphere about food. And I'll give you an example. I was giving my dogs a treat. My two females were right there waiting for the cookie, and my boy was at the door sleeping. He goes, yeah, I don't care about it that much. That's just how he rolls. But so those are things you want to really be thoughtful about that. Well, you know how shepherds are. You know how labs are. No, it's a dog. It's an individual. So you have to always remember to look at it that way, and what the situation that caused that. The other one is hindsight, which is a lot when we, hindsight is like, oh, I knew that was going to happen. I knew we were going to have a low pass rate on. That's a mental management piece. I knew it. I knew that wasn't going to work out. When I saw that room, I just knew it wasn't going to be working, or she couldn't do that. I saw that grass; it just can't do it. So after
the famous one, I knew they were going to pee in the search area. He always does that. Where he peed one time, like 3 years ago. So.
Right. And then the other one is, this is a trial one, misinformation. It's the eyewitness, right? Oh, what happened? Well, he just went and he was just looking around and he was really interested in the other dogs. And, I don't know what happened. And it's like, when you look at the video, none of that was true. So what we remember, what happened and what we remember is never always the same thing. And I am guilty of that as well. I think it was a run with Cha-Cha. I go, well, we did this and she did that and we did this and it was great. And when I saw the video, I'm like, I didn't do any of that. Not even close. So those are little things that you want to be. So when you come out of your search areas or your training, always remember what you did. Don't try to recollect. Just remember what you did well and what you did right, and don't try to figure out, oh, why she peed, because then you're going to think about it and you're not going to really. You're going to put things in there that really weren't true or that didn't really happen, and that's happened in a few of my video reviews with people. It's like, well, they did this, and when we saw the video review, not even close. It didn't even happen. So. And this is what I was talking about, the halo effect with your coach or instructor. They're human beings too. And just because they're nice people, and I'm sure they are, doesn't mean everything is correct. Always question your instructors. I always tell people that. Always question. Some of my students do that more better than others, but mostly it's good questions. You should be questioning, and there should be no problem to question. Well, why is it like that? Why does it happen? I don't know if whatever. It's not being argumentative. Is really trying to understand and asking the questions. And your instructor should be able to answer those or get an answer for you if she doesn't know it, because we don't know everything. We try, but we don't know everything. So sometimes we have to go, it's like, oh, let me check that, or let me think about that, because I sometimes don't have the answers at that moment. But it's always a good idea to challenge your instructor a little bit, not challenge, but ask and really find out. They sometimes they could be wrong too. And I have been on occasion where I was like, oh, that wasn't quite right there. we need to change that, because that's we're just people. And sometimes, we didn't realize it, or we didn't get the right information. The other thing is the actor observer, which is, we do this as just people, but we do definitely do it in, is if we do something wrong, it was because it was raining and I was cold, or I was jet lagged. I didn't feel so good, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So you screwed up because it was an external, something outside happened to cause you to make that error, make that mistake. And then observer, but for other people, it's because he's a jerk or he's lazy. So it's and we do it a lot with people. So, and so this goes back to, well, I was tired. Well, the dog's just being lazy. He just doesn't want to do it. It's not, it couldn't be that maybe he wasn't feeling good either, or he wasn't having a great day either, right? So that bias is something that we unfortunately take out on our dogs a lot. And we put them on that, it's like, oh, he's just so stubborn. But I was just really, I was just cold. So external, internal, right? So you want to be real mindful of that. Or that judge was just such a jerk. And it was like, that person came out and looked at my dog. So that was the reason, that happened, instead of, maybe it was not that. And and this kind of brought me back to, this is something that we do, and I didn't realize the availability heuristic. When you see like, oh, everybody failed containers, it was really a lot of people failed it. That's why we failed it. No. The fail rate wasn't that high that day. But if you're seeing a lot of it, you think a lot of it is happening, and it's not. Or that containers, and that is a big thing we have in nosework, right? Containers are a big bugaboo. And they are to a certain extent, but not that much more than anything else, right? Because a lot of them are errors or whatever. And that's why sometimes, and it really goes back to letting things get in your head, right? So when you're in training, I want you to kind of think about those, like, why, if you didn't have a good training day, or you didn't have a good trial day, or a good practice, make sure you're not letting any of these kind of influence your self-talk and your training methodology and your training strategy. So if you might think, well, he's just being lazy, so I'm just going to make him search longer. Are things that we can do that affect the training.
Right. And I think this is why when you hear us talk about keep a journal of types of things of what you're working on, this is why it's so important. If you have some of these predispositions about your dog, oh my gosh, he pees in exteriors all the time, or he can't find an elevated hide, it's really, really hard for him. It's really nice to write down what actually happened, because 3 months later, you can flip back through the book and say, interesting. we have done 25 exteriors and he only peed in 2 of them. So I guess he doesn't pee as much as I thought he did. Or, you know, we found almost all the elevated hides, except for that one that was really hard. It can help to change your own mind and let the dog speak for himself, as opposed to what you think might have happened in the past. The dogs are always evolving and learning, and they get to grow as well. And so, you know, that's part of that mental management piece where you have to leave things behind. But always keep track and ask the dog how he's doing at this point in time.
Right. All right. So the big question, how do you know to move on when you're working on a skill, right? Let's say you're working on a particular skill. How do you know when to move on? So we're going to look at some video. So the big thing is when the dog understands a problem. So what I put the little hint for looking at mom, if the dog understands a problem, they shouldn't be looking back at you for help, right? Most of the time they shouldn't be. They should be like, I got this and I don't need you. If they continue to look back at you for assistance or something, it's either a habit or they don't understand the problem quite yet, right? And then works without hesitation, right? They're working the problem, and they don't look to you. They're not stopping and all that. They are just working fluidly. Then you're ready to move on to the next level of training, whatever that level is. So I'm actually, I'm going to use some of the videos that we use for our online class, because I got to tell you, that kind of shows how you move on and how you progress it. So we're going to, and then that way we can talk a little bit about it. Could you see this video, the screen, the YouTube?
No.
No? Okay, hold on. Hold the bus. Let me put you back to. Okay. Hold on. Okay. Did anybody have any questions? I saw in chat. Oh, okay. All right. All righty. Okay. So this is NW1. We had, we're going to go to week 3 and we're going to kind of talk about corners and how we progress that. So this video is corners for NW1 dogs, okay? So you see in this video for NW1, it's a pretty straightforward, very not so complex problem, right? It's only one hide, and this is a very novice dog, still learning how to do corners and how to work corners. So we put it so that he could easily get to the hide and be able to open up enough space so he can work out that problem. Okay, so that's NW1. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy. And then to make sure he understands it, we did a second one and another corner, right? Same chair, no lingering, and this time he was able to understand the problem a lot faster. So would you move this dog on to go to another level? Probably. What? So let me ask you, with Luke, why wouldn't you move him on? Anybody?
Was this his first attempt at corners, or has he been
Yeah.
working on it for a while?
He'd done 1 or 2 prior, but not a lot.
I would probably not move him on just so he had more repetitions.
Right. So why do you say that? What did you see in that training that you would say, he might need a little more work?
It took him 2 times to really get the concept, it took him a lot longer to find the first corner, and I would like to see him get the first one quicker.
Right. Anybody else have a different thought? Right, and that's exactly my point. Well, he figured it out. He did fine. But yeah, I would agree. He took that first round. It took him a bit to figure out what he was doing. It wasn't intuitive for him to go into those corners. Right? So very good. So this is another kind of dog, another breed of dog. Okay, so would you move that dog on or not? And why not? Come on, don't be shy. There's no right or wrong answer.
So Deb says she doesn't like getting into small spaces. She wouldn't move her on.
Which Deb, Perry?
Yep. Hmm.
Anybody else? What other reason? That's a good one.
Yeah. Jill Ramsey says she left odor and came back.
Right. So those are two really good reasons not to move her on. You would want less of those two things. You'd want to set up again, have her see it again, and have her and see if she can work it out faster the next time. So one of the interesting things with her, she moves into odor really easily. But she but she doesn't stay there, so there's other stuff going on there. Okay. All right.
And so I think, talking about progression, if you are seeing a dog that's not willing to stick with odor, right, in multiple situations, barring it's something about a certain hide placement, that's absolutely you would not move on, right? Because if the core foundation of odor is something they're not going to stick with, then don't go anywhere. You really need a lot more foundation work.
So this is an NW2 with corners and tight spaces. We did a combo. We increased the challenge here for these dogs, but we still kept that corner pretty open, right? So with this dog, would you move him on? He's not super fast, but he never has been. That's
Yeah,
his-
I think he's ready because he got right to work and, nailed it.
yeah. He's not the super fast dog. He's not. He never will be. But he's a pretty efficient guy. He got it in 54 seconds. He's not going to break any speed records, but he was able to get to work and solve those problems pretty easily, right? And it didn't. He bypassed the one hide, but it wasn't because he didn't know what he was doing. It's because he was going to that other one. Let's see what else we got. I know the answer to this one. He's lucky he's very handsome. So would you move this dog on? I know the answer, but go ahead and anybody?
Joe Ramsey says yes.
I probably would. He went right in, got it, and was done. And
Yes.
he didn't have any trouble getting under that table as big as he is.
No, he doesn't have trouble getting into smash
Yeah.
faces. He thinks he's a poodle. And then he hits his head all the time. Yeah, he's yes, when he, and so this is a different thing, right? He's my dog, obviously. When he's on, he's very consistent. He's great, but when he's not, so he is still having some focus issues, which is why I'm not very quick to move him on. While he has good skill, he's still having some focus issues, so I'm not pursuing it. Even though he looks good on that video. If there's a shiny light, that might be the end of that. So.
And I would also kind of be careful with what he's doing with the chair, because as Miss Penny doesn't go underneath.
Mhm. Got that right, honey.
Yep.
Yes, they are related, the little darlings. She's so cute. She's a beast. She's a jerk, but she's a beast. All right. Would you move her on?
Jill says, I think so.
Anybody else? And if no, why not? I mean, how many, raise your hand. I think if there's a hand raised where you think that you would move her on. Yeah, and I would too. She's pretty efficient. She's all work. What's causing her what's causing her the slowdown is Noelle, her handler. She's really good. Oh, this is NW3. We don't want that. So, whoops, sorry. Got a little itchy on the trigger finger. Hold on. That was weak. That was NW3, right? Yes. Wait, was that week 3 or week 2 that we just watched?
Week 3.
No, NW3, right? Or was it 2?
No, this is NW3. We watched 1 and 2.
Okay. Yeesh. Okay. So how would you move her along? This is NW3. You can watch it again. Oh no, that's no. I know that's the inaccessible one. I already saw this one. Ugh. Sorry, guys. So this is an inaccessible NW3 with a corner inaccessible hide. So she was pretty quick to give you that information, right? Because I'm gonna get there if I have to squeeze my big fat ass. All right. So of those two dogs, who would you move on? The husky or the lab?
Spirit.
Right. Jive had a little too much trouble with that pooling under the table, right? So this is what you want to look at. So, so then which part of the training problem would you represent? Would be the pooling under the table, not the inaccessible in the corner, because she was able to do that right away. So that's how you kind of pick apart. So then we're going to do the same week 3.
So let me ask a question before you start that video.
Sure.
Would you set up the exact same pooling problem under that table, or might you take, where would you do? Would you make that easier, or would you make it the same for the dog if they had that much trouble?
Anybody? Are they chatting?
Nope.
No, what would you do? I mean, there's a couple of ways to handle it, right? It doesn't have to be one way. You can handle it a couple of different ways.
I would
Yes.
probably leave it the same problem as is, because she didn't stop working.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I mean. You could set it up more pooling in a different same problem, different place, and then I would go back and set up the same problem again and see if she has a little easier time, right?
Yeah, and
One way
Christy
to do
says lots of repetition on easier pooling.
Yep. So, and all of those answers will get you to your, but we all agree that moving her on is not a good idea. For example, moving on or making that more complicated would be letting it sit there longer, or adding more stuff in the middle. That's how you would make that problem a little more challenging. So you wouldn't do those things because she didn't go in there and just nail it, right? So you would want to give that dog more time to be able to handle those problems, right? So this is an elite level. I think we have 3 hides in this space, right? She's such a brat.
Give me my
She's-
cookie
yeah.
right now.
So this problem, so yeah, so you can see how you would make the problem harder, and you could see how if you try to do this hide with jive, it would be really hard. She would not do well. We've got an elevated, that pulling hide, and a corner hide. That's a lot. She couldn't do the NW3 one easily, right?
I love Cha-Cha.
She does humble you when she looks at you like, oh my God, you're still not here. She does. She looks at you like, oh my God, it's so hard to find good help. See, she always looks at you like, oh my God, you're so hard to, just don't know. Anyway, so that was a really good example of, but you see how you wouldn't move Jibe up to the elite search because she couldn't do it, but you'd be amazed how many people do it all the time. And that's what I mean. Like when I asked you, what would you do? Yeah, you could set up more pooling problems, easier pooling problems. You could do any of those things to give her a better skill. And then you can go ahead and set it up again and see what you have. But a lot of people think, oh, they did it right once, that's good enough. It's like, no.
Yeah.
You have to present it in a lot of different places.
I cannot tell you how many times over I preach to my students, and I just, one of the phrases I say all the time is, just because they can doesn't mean they should, right? And with this online homework, I cannot tell you, the first night that we were there, everyone said, well, yeah, but it was too easy, so I wanted to set up a challenge for the dog. The homework didn't say that, but it's just the mentality, right? I really want, the dog found it too easy, or it seems like it wasn't a big enough challenge for the dog. Okay, well, then we could talk about that and move on, but it doesn't have to be infinitely harder where the dog actually struggles to find it. There's sometimes not a lot of learning that goes on there as well. We gain more frustration and affect that motivation a little bit more when we have many of those in a row versus a lot of simple foundational ones and then one hard one.
Right. So same example with elevation, right? So this is an NW1 elevated hide. This is how you introduce it, right? Something easy, just above the dog's nose. And you're at that level, you're expanding their search area to go above their head, right? So you're not going to put it so far above their head that they can't figure it out. And this is another view, but it's the same thing. It's just slightly above the head. You're expanding the search area for them at this level, right? And here's another example of another way to do it. Really nice. Just slightly above the dog's head, just barely getting up there, right? So, and that was, so those are multiple ways for you to do it. A chair, a little corner in a wall, that's a really nice option, right? It was too high and it was just enough where the dog can get in there and be successful right away. That was
Right.
really nice.
So Maureen is asking, can a dog get bored if you keep them at a level too long or become unmotivated? And I think,
Yeah, they could.
yes, but I think it happens to the human long before it happens to the dog, because the dog's
Yeah.
getting lots of cookies, right? So I think
Yeah.
we get much more bored saying, oh, they can find everything so simple now, let's do some harder stuff, which is true.
Yeah, and the truth is, yeah, you're gonna keep them at that level, make sure they have the skill, and then you're gonna move them on, right? You're not gonna
Right.
keep them there forever if the dog is showing progress. Because the truth is, if they're going in there and nailing it, yeah, they can get bored and then it won't be fun anymore. But then you start adding, you can progressively make it more challenging, right? Like at the level 1, the elevation, you could put, okay, you could put it on the back of a chair and then you could put stuff around it to make it a little more challenging for them to get there, right? And you could put that on there, a little more challenge. Then you could do, then you could before you move it up slightly, right? So yes, you want, if the dog's going in there and going, oh my God, I'm doing the same, it's just so easy, then yeah, you need to make it more, a little, just add a challenge, but a little challenge, not a big challenge. Like that chair hide, you can go, okay, I'm gonna just put stuff around it. And that's it. And see how he does with that, right? So this is a level, yeah, there's the arrow. So here what we've done, if we've made it a little bit more elevated, a little more challenging, but we've only put one hide out. We're not putting a whole bunch of hides out, right? Because if they can't figure this out, we're not going to make it harder. So here at level 2, if she's doing well, or he, sorry, you can add, we can change things up a little bit, add more stuff, make it a little more elevated. But in this case, he's working the pulling problem. You don't need to make it any more challenging for this dog. It's good enough.
So Deb Perry says, I think a dog would become more bored and demotivated by being presented with stuff that's too hard rather than searches where they're able to be successful. That's absolutely
Amen.
true.
And
Yep.
we have seen many dogs come our way that way. They really.
Amen, sister. I did it to my puppy. I really did. I speak from experience.
Yeah.
And I know better. And I still did it.
That wasn't that elevated for him. He's a big horse. NW2, okay, NW3.
So question,
Yeah.
if you thought your dog was ready to move on and now you find you're struggling with the skill, would you actually push him back down to the lower level and make it easier?
Yes.
It's the reverse of what we're talking
Yes.
about now.
Correct. Yes. If you move up and you're like, oops, we probably weren't, because everybody makes a mistake. Been there, done that. Everybody makes a mistake where you move on quicker than you should. Yeah, then you go back and help and get their confidence and then go back to the more. Yes, absolutely. Don't keep pushing on that harder one, because.
No, and think about it in child learning, right? When we see the children start to fall behind in classes, if we just continue plugging ahead and we don't help them by either, giving them a tutor or some sort of extra help to stimulate that learning and help them progress, they're just going to fall off the wagon from there, right? So sometimes they get held back to actually go over that again. But yeah, that's where you don't want to progress when the dog is not having a great understanding of what you're asking them to do.
And so here, this is for NW3, what we did to make it harder is we took the chairs away and we put a table. So now that odor doesn't have a real good place for it to hang on to for the dog to work it back. So it's a little more challenging, right? She's so cute. She's like, come on. Do you know how hungry the husky is? And you see how my lab, she tends to want to chase the odor a little bit, right? So my lab needs a little more skill working those type of hides because she does tend to want to chase and has a hard time pinpointing. She's a great searcher and she does really nice, but it's something that I know we have to work on. So it's part of, part of our learning, right? And so this is an elite level hide, right? And it's still the only hide presented. It's the only hide presented. Otherwise, it just gets really complicated because then if you put a bunch of hides out, you don't know which one's giving him the trouble. So you want to know like what is giving him issues, problems, or whatever. So you want to make sure this is by the small chunking part. That this is small chunking. We're only working this, right? And then we also set up an elevated hide in a narrow space, right? Yeah, she's ridiculous. Because I'm starving. All right, so those are kind of some examples of progressions and how you would move it along to make it harder. So you wouldn't go ahead and and this is why when you're working on like the elevations, that's a really an important skill. That's why I only ask people to do one of those and see how the dog handles it. If the dog is struggling with one, you're not adding more hides around isn't going to make it better. You need to see if the dog can handle that. If the dog does, like Eli had a really easy time with that elevated hide, okay, you can probably add another one then because he's able to handle it. But until you know he can handle that elevated one, don't add. Don't add. And also, and that rule applies if you're going to be outside too. Outside, can he handle the one hide? Okay, then let's add another one, right? So that is how instead of because I've seen more often than not, I've seen dogs become unmotivated because the challenges presented were really hard. And they were continually asked to do, it's no different, it's like doing calculus all the time. After a while, you're like, well, screw this, calculus really sucks. I don't want to do it, right? And so you want to balance it out. You want to give them some challenge, but you also want to be able to, keep them motivated and happy and working.
So Deb asked, you gave Jive quite a bit of time to source that pooling problem.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I struggle with balancing how long to let them work on something versus when I need to abort and dial it down a notch.
Okay. And Jive worked it, because I think she worked it, it wasn't quite a minute. She didn't work it that long. So I'm usually if they don't figure it out, for me, and I even do this, unless the dog is really, like Jive was still working on it. So I think it took her about a minute to figure that pooling problem out. And I was okay with that. So what I would want to see when I set it up again is if she resolves that problem sooner. So letting them go on for 3 and 4 and 5 minutes without working out, it's like you got to change something sooner than that.
Yep. And Sharon, when you do you add another elevated hide or a lower one? I think it depends on what skill you're trying to work on with the dog.
Yeah, I would. So just know what's more difficult, right? 2 elevated hides, depending on how far apart they are, could be more challenging. But so you can have an elevated hide with a low hide somewhere else in the room would probably not be a big problem. That would be a pretty easily resolved one. But you could also have a elevated hide with a low hide really close. That would make that problem a lot harder, right? So again, you'd want to do elevated, another hide far apart. Can they work that out? Great. Then you progress it with the hide closer. Awesome. Then you would do it with the 2 elevateds further apart. Can they work that out? Yes. And then eventually, even though you'll probably never say never, but you wouldn't have too many elevated hides close together. But that's how, so you want to know what the challenge is, right? If you're going to do an elevated hide with a low, If it's far away or far enough apart, it's not a problem. Most dogs get it. But if it's closer together, then it's going to be a little more challenging. So it depends on what, like Joanne said, what you're working on.
Right. So just because I know you're dissecting at NW2, don't do that.
Yeah. Well, and like, I think Jive, I would like to see how long it did take her to work out that problem. Which one was that? Was that a 3?
Yeah, the 3 elevation.
Okay. No, was it? No, it was the corner one. Right?
Oh, yeah, I guess ask Deb Perry. Did you mean the elevated one or did you mean the one under the table, Deb? Under the table. Okay, so yeah,
The 2?
yep.
Oh no, the 3. The 3. It was a 3. Hold on. Sorry. So it took her. I'm looking to see how long it took her. 158. Yeah, actually, yeah. So Deb, it took her about 55 seconds to work out that pooling problem. So I'm pretty comfortable with letting them work it out that long, right? That was 158 to 243. So that was about, a little less than a minute. It took her to work out that problem. So to me, that's where I think it's a problem. It took her kind of long. So I would be looking for to lower that time. So it took her a minute. So if I were to set that up again, I'd like to see her maybe do it in 30 seconds instead of a minute, right? And all that. But I don't like to let them go more than a couple of minutes working a problem, because that can be very demotivating for the dog. At the higher levels, they can go a little longer. And like for Dive, she's a pretty drivey dog, so I don't worry as much. But I wouldn't let her work anything more than 2 minutes. Where my boy, I would not let Tango work anything more than 30 or 45 seconds because he can get pretty demotivated quickly. My lab doesn't. She's like, what? I'll keep going, but he does. So.
Yeah, and also it is a second thing, right, where you can sort of put a time limit to it, but also it's, if you see the dog narrowing in to the solving the problem, right, and maybe that is taking just a little bit longer, I think it's okay as long as you're seeing the problem solving progress. But what you don't want to do is, right, they come in, they come out, they come in, they can't find it. You don't see a bracket. They're going back and forth, right? That's where I really think that's more about the abort after the minute, right, or so, versus, yeah, it's been a minute, but she's really hanging out at that corner and she's trying to get in there, and she's not really leaving that area. I might give her a little bit longer, but not a ton, right?
Yeah.
Would you agree with that, Nance?
Yeah. And I just wouldn't, just leaving the dog work out problems for, long, like
Right.
4 or 5 minutes. That's just, having a search that's 4 or 5 minutes where the dog is productive of finding, like that you have a 5-minute search, but you're finding hides. I'm good with that. But if you're only had one problem and one hide and the dog's taking like 4 or 5 minutes to find it, that's no, right? So it depends on, if you can have a long search, 5-6 minutes for elite. Do not do this if you have a lower level dog. But if you have a 5 or 6 minute hide, but the dog's finding hides, then it's all good, no problem. But if the dog's not finding a hide and it's been 4 or 5 minutes, no, that could really, especially for a dog that's an NW1 or 2, that would really be very demotivating for that dog. Yep, because I never let that happen to my lab ever. She never searched that long at that level when she was at that level. Like now I can push her a little more because she's at a higher level, but I wouldn't do that. So just be mindful. So, and then that's what I mean. It depends on if the dog is just running around and not being able to work it out, I would stop it. But if the dog is, like Joanne said, narrowing in on it, let her finish. Let her get it done. All right. Any other questions? This is a lot. But any other questions? It was good.
Yep. I think you should really always keep that phrase in your head. Truly, just because they can doesn't mean they should. Every once in a while, it's fine to test them out and see if they can do, something harder. But in general, like Nancy said in the very beginning, right? Have a plan when you're setting your hides, and what skill are you working? What level are you working on? And I just think that's really helpful to continue your progression with your dog, because you start to break things down and really see, where their holes are and where they're doing really, really well.
Right. All right, guys. Have a good evening. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
See you guys soon.
Thank you.